In Rwanda, it was unbelievably fast.
In a mere 100 days, nearly 1 million people were killed.
Many say it is just too little, too late.
In most cases, there is nothing the medics can do.
A week after the refugee crisis erupted,
engendered much guilt, which continues today.
1994 in Eastern Africa, 800,000 people were slaughtered in just 100 days. This has become known around the world as the Rwandan genocide. Many of the dead were of Tutsi ethnicity, while most perpetrators were of ethnic Hutu extremists. Many innocent lives were lost, while other citizens were forced to participate in the massacre. There was a long history of violence prior to the genocide between the majority Hutus and the minority Tutsis that was deepened by colonialism. The Hutus and the Tutsis were two out of the three groups that inherited Rwanda, sharing the same language and tradition. Although being of the same culture, Hutus were peasant cultivators and Tutsis were cattlers who gained political power from wealth through cattle ownership. They were also slightly different in appearance. When the colonists arrived in 1916, they favored the Tutsis for being thinner and taller, while having more European-resembling facial features. They granted them as the more superior race. All Rwandans were then forced to carry identification cards, which deepened the divide. The Tutsis welcomed the idea and were given better opportunities. This built anger in the Hutus and led to a series of riots where in 1959, 20,000 Tutsis were killed, while others fled to nearby countries. In 1962, when Belgium gave back control, the Hutu majority took over government, turning the tables as the oppressed then became in charge. The Tutsis were then blamed for all the country's economic and social struggles. Tutsis who had fled the country for safety were at the same time forming the Rwandan Patriotic Front, in aims of ridding the Hutu president and returning to their homeland. They sent many threats, leading to even more tension and division. Then in April 1994, the boiling point was reached, as the Hutu president's plane was shot down, beginning the unforgettable genocide that crippled Rwanda's prospects for development and continues to do so 20 years today. To fully understand the impact of the genocide on Rwanda's still developing state, we will look at the social and economic fallout that Rwandans face, which has caused a detrimental impact to growth. The older demographic is most impacted by the social stigma as they still live with the haunting memories of the genocide. Over 100,000 children are heading approximately 42,000 households. These children have lost parents from the genocide, while others have died from AIDS from the large amount of dead bodies. Some are still in prison for genocide-related crimes. The women that were raped will remain scarred for life, becoming socially isolated as some are left by their husbands while others are deemed unsuitable for marriage. Women with unwanted pregnancies also lead to dangerous self-induced abortions, while other victims have been impaired by various sexually transmitted diseases such as syphilis, HIV, and AIDS. These factors not only cause a negative impact on the physiological and psychological welfare of Rwandans, but also cause an economic burden. As of 2011, Rwanda's GDP was roughly 6.4 billion USD, while almost 25% of this was spent on healthcare and programs to help women cope with these tragedies. To put this into perspective, Canada only spent roughly 12% of GDP on healthcare in 2012. Having such a large amount of funds being allocated towards health reduces for investment in infrastructures, businesses, and other human capital services. However, without this, only more deaths will come to Rwanda, as infant mortality has already dropped to fewer than 40 in 2012 from 120 deaths per 1,000 live births in 1998. Life expectancy has also risen from 48 years of age in 2000 to 62 in 2011. The prison population has bloated to over 100,000 people from the countless incarcerated murderers and rapists, costing valuable resources for sustaining and guarding prisons. This again is another factor that contributes negatively to Rwanda's economic progress. Currently, the country relies heavily on foreign aid, which accounts for 30 to 40% of their budget, but this has been on a decline since 2012, causing a deceleration of 4.7%. In 2011, foreign aid accounted for nearly 20% of the country's GDP, displaying Rwanda's dependence on international assistance. Inequality is also a debilitating factor, as 10% of the population currently receives 43% of the country's income. While the genocide left a crumbling effect on the country, there is a gleam of hope for the future. There's a large growing demographic of children in the educational institutions who have never experienced a genocide. These children are being taught to seek peace and are being deterred from identifying themselves as Hutu or Tutsi. This stems a new hope for Rwanda, as the people of today will look towards this demographic to form a unified country and raise Rwanda from its ashes. To do so, policies must be in place that further work to end the hate between the two groups and foster a sense of patriotism while together overcoming social and economic struggles. The following are recommendations that the Rwandan government should consider in process of rebuilding. Rwanda should continue implementing the Poverty Reduction Strategic Plan, which was incorporated in the 2008 to 2012 Economic Development and Poverty Reduction Strategy, also known as the EDPRS. The government has thus embarked on the second EDPRS, which is being implemented from 2013 to 2018. Rwanda's long-term goals in its Vision 2020 is to transform from a low-income agriculture-based economy to a knowledge-based, service-oriented economy with a middle-income country status. To achieve long-term development goals, they have formulated a medium-term strategy which prioritizes growth acceleration and poverty reduction through 4 thematic areas. These of which include economic transformation, rural development, productivity, youth employment, and accountable governance. Since the initiation of Vision 2020, Rwanda has progressed towards reaching their objectives and even exceeded some of its targets. With less than 10 years towards the realization of the vision, it was necessary to assess the relevance of the indicators and target to ensure that they continue to reflect the ambition of the country. The government is currently undertaking strategic investments to boost productivity and increase access to resources. The second EDPRS is aiming to increase GDP per capita by $1,000, reduce poverty rate to below 30%, and reduce extreme poverty rate to below 9% by 2018. Rwanda should also aim to alleviate the dependency of foreign aid, as it accounts for approximately 20% of the country's gross national income, yet these funds are on a steady decline. The government of Rwanda is committed to the cause of gender equality and women's empowerment as demonstrated by the 2003 Constitution. There has been an approval of the National Gender Policy, the establishment of national gender machineries, and of policy for elimination of discrimination against women. This demonstrates the government's commitment to combating all forms of gender inequalities in Rwanda and issues related to community development. To progress this further, the Rwandan government should continue to develop, implement, and monitor policies for gender equality and ethnic equity while addressing community concerns. Education and access to safe contraception should be advocated to slow down the population, as high population growth leads to larger issues that Rwanda should avoid while in this rebuilding state. The younger generation should also be more encouraged to be involved in society by gaining access to education and employment opportunities. This would also decline fertility rate, assist in economic growth, foster productivity, and prepare this demographic to lead the society they are living in. Lastly, the government should instill policies of equality for anti-ethnic discrimination that will lead to building a unified relationship between the Tutsis and the Hutus. Ideally, it could be written under legislation where individuals may not discriminate and distinguish themselves as either Tutsi or Hutu origin. This could potentially end the feud between the rivaling groups, which will be the most significant factor that can project Rwanda into ascertaining to their fullest potential. Only in unity can Rwandan people free themselves from the shackles of their past that has long prevented them from creating a better tomorrow.